Okay, so we were covering the Chesapeake colonies, which were part of the Southern colonies, and now we're going to cover kind of the further south colonies by talking about Carolina and Georgia. So Carolina was initially just one colony. It wasn't North and South Carolina. It actually split later in the early 1700s. And Carolina was established. It was supposed to be a barrier to Spanish expansion north of Florida. So when we're talking about like America and the world, one of the things that we can use for that AP theme is talking about how different European groups vied for power in North America. So that's something that could go under that theme. Carolina was an offshoot of Barbados. So Barbados was a slave colony. There were a lot of sugar plantations in Barbados in the Caribbean. And because Carolina is an offshoot of that, it will be a slave colony from its founding. The fundamental constitution of Carolina established a feudal society. So if you remember from world history, feudalism, you have the landowner and then you have serfs. And so the whole idea of Carolina was supposed to be a feudal society where you have people that would own a lot of land, and those would be your wealthier people in society who had power. So even though Carolina was supposed to be a feudal society, it did allow for religious toleration and it had an elected assembly. But keep in mind that elected assembly is going to be wealthy white men who are landowners. Later on, that will evolve into large plantation owners. So when South Carolina and North Carolina split, South Carolina is going to become more of a colony focused on rice plantations because it is the low country. So it's got the good climate and geography to grow rice, especially if you've been to Charleston or areas like that on the coast. You know, the kind of below sea level. It's wet. It's very warm, so rice grows well in that area. Whereas North Carolina is going to be more like the Chesapeake colonies in that it will be a tobacco colony. So here's an example of a plantation home in South Carolina. This one is about halfway between Myrtle Beach and Charleston. And you can see here, again, it's very wet. This is a good place to be able to grow rice and make money off of rice plantations. Here's another example. This was in Georgetown, South Carolina. It's about 45 miles north of Charleston. And again, it's near water, so you've got the right conditions to grow rice, but it's also right here on the water, which makes it good to be able to transport the rice once it's harvested and trade and make money that way. Okay, so Georgia is the last of the original 13 colonies. So we're not covering the colonies in the order they were founded, more in the region they're located in. But Georgia was the last colony established by the British, and it was established by a man named James Oglethorpe in 1732. And Oglethorpe originally wanted Georgia to be a colony without slaves and without alcohol. However, he had problems getting people to move to Georgia if they couldn't own slaves or drink alcohol, so he rescinds that. And Georgia was supposed to be a place for debtors. So remember, I talked about one of the reasons that people moved to the colonies was because they were in debtor's prison, and this represented an opportunity for a second chance for them. And so Georgia is one of the main colonies that debtors moved to have that second chance. It was also meant to be another buffer to the Spanish in Florida and to kind of create a buffer between the Spanish colonies in Florida and the British colonies north of there. So, like I said, they didn't have slavery or liquor at first. It was small land holdings, but then eventually Georgia is going to move into more like rice plantations, kind of like South Carolina. If you've ever been to Savannah, Georgia, you'll notice that it's laid out in kind of a square and block layout. So if you've been to Savannah, you kind of walk, and then you have like a fountain or a huge monument in the square. And so that was designed by Oglethorpe like that. And Georgia is also going to focus on rice. Again, if you've been to Savannah, you know it's in the low country near the coast, and so the climate and geography make it good for that. Georgia and South Carolina will also have a large slave population as rice plantations will continue to grow in those two areas. And that is it for the southern colonies.